Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Public Safety and Military Affairs. Today is January 22nd, 2025, and we are in conference room 225. This is an informational briefing and is also being streamed online on YouTube. Just a few housekeeping items. There will be no testimony at this time. The content, including the hearing notice and briefing materials, can be found on the Hawaii State Legislature's website. And this is our first committee hearing of the year, so welcome, everyone. And thank you to those that are in the audience here for your participation today. With us today, we have Senator Rhodes, who's a member on the Public Safety and Military Affairs Committee, and I believe Vice Chair Wokai should be joining us shortly. Today's hearing, the purpose of this informational briefing is to discuss the following reports: the Hawaii Correctional System Oversight Commission Staffing Report, January 2025, and the Hawaii Correctional System Oversight Commission Annual Report 2024. And we have two agencies with us today. We're going to reverse the order so that it's a little easier. So first, we're going to have the Hawaii Correctional System Oversight Commission to go first, followed by the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, DCR. And members, and for those watching here or on YouTube, we've asked the departments to present a 20-minute presentation, and then during the transition, we can open it up for questions and answers throughout the presentation or at the end. With that, from the Oversight Commission, we have Coordinator Kristen Johnson and Chair Mark Patterson. So if you could just introduce yourself, please.
Aloha, my name is Mark Patterson, Chair of the Hawaii Correctional System Oversight Commission. Good to be here.
Aloha, my name is Kristen Johnson. I'm the Oversight Coordinator of the Hawaii Correctional System Oversight Commission.
Thank you. Before we continue, I do want to recognize newly elected Rep. Garner Shimizu, who's in the audience with us today. Aloha.
Great.
Yeah. Please continue.
Great. Well, thank you so much for inviting us. We're really excited to talk about our work in the past year and also our newest report, which was just uploaded to our website today. So it's very fresh. So very briefly, I just want to go over our 2024 annual report. This will be a very brief presentation because I want to make sure that the majority of our time is spent on the staffing report. So in the 2024 report, we really went over the history of the commission, our current commissioners and current staff. And for those of you who may not be aware, the commission is a relatively new entity. The law was passed in 2019 to create the commission. The commissioners started meeting in January of 2020 and continued to meet since then. But due to COVID and other factors, funding wasn't released until 2022. So the office itself wasn't open until July 2022 when I started. And that's when the work really began in earnest, when we started putting out monthly annual reports and facility-specific reports. So on our commission, we have Mark Patterson, Mark Browning, Ronnie Barra, Martha Tornay, and Mike Town. And each of the commissioners are chosen by different entities of the state, so OHA, the governor, chief justice, House Speaker, and also the Senate president. So the power and duties of the commission can kind of be broken into four pieces. So we investigate, we set population limits, we monitor and oversee the reentry system, and then there's this other specific part about facilitating a correctional system transition to a rehabilitative and therapeutic model. So that's what we focus all of our work on, is really that transition piece. So as far as oversight and public accountability, in the last year, we've had 18 public meetings. 11 of those were monthly meetings, and 6 of those were House Concurrent Resolution 23 meetings, and then we had 1 community input meeting. For public reporting, last year we reported on 12 deaths in custody. We also did 20 public reports. 12 of those were the monthly reports, and 8 were facility-specific reports. We conducted over 33 correctional facility visits, and the importance of these visits is that we go in and we talk to staff, we talk to people in custody to really get a better understanding of what is actually happening in the facilities on the ground level. We also have some notable tours. We went to the Going Home Hawaii Reentry Housing, Halava and Waiawa's resource fairs, Halava's annual commencement celebration, and also the Makahiki at Saguaro. Last year, the commission published over 60 facility-specific recommendations and 2 system-wide recommendations. The system-wide recommendations are recommendations where we recognize the director can't change everything and not everything's in his power, but it's really encouraging the director to work with different entities of the state to make that change within the system. We also attended various local and national conferences. We attended the Justice Innovation Summit, the Reckoning with Restorative Justice, the Breaking Cycle Symposium updates, roundtables, and community meetings, the Wellness and Resilience Summit, and the Hawaii Island Sequential Intercept event. And then on the national level, we've attended Vera Institute webinars and also the 2024 annual conference of the National Association of Civilian of Law Enforcement. And then also the Prison and Jail Innovation Lab conference, which really focused on deaths in custody. And I bring those up because there is a specific part of our mandate where it really talks about, you know, having updated education and information regarding not only what's going on in your state, but what's going on across the country. Our strategic plan is embedded in our annual report. That is a living, breathing document. We update it frequently. And that plan has 4 strategic priorities that are broken into oversight, rehabilitation, population limits, and reentry. All of those are very thoroughly talked about in the report. And then lastly, we have our legislative priorities. So we talked about funding and how we are officially a part of the state budget, which is very exciting for us. We also talked about how we have been requesting revisions to 353L, which is the commission's statute. And really what we're looking to do is increase the oversight coordinator term from 2 years to 4 years, among a couple other things. And then lastly, we have a little bit about the HCR 23 task force. The reason why is because the commission was actually asked to chair that task force. And so we included all that information on our website and the annual report. So that is it for the annual report. And so with chair's permission, I can move to
Members, if you're okay, we'll allow the commissioner oversight to continue with the staffing report. And we can ask questions at the end. Yep, go ahead.
Great. All right, the moment we've all been waiting for. So the correctional staff survey findings and recommendations report was a massive report that we took on. It took us over a year to get this project done. And we took it on because as we toured the jails and prisons and we talked to the staff, we consistently heard about how difficult it is to work in those environments and all the different factors that make it difficult. And we really wanted to know the staff that not only do we hear you, we really want to work with you to make the change that you need to do your job and make your job more impactful for the incarcerated population. So with that, we really wanted to uplift their voices and their experiences, and that's what this report is all about. So first, when thinking about this report, we really had to focus on our research methods, and ultimately we decided that a written survey was the best way to capture the measurable impacts of what people were going through. So we chose a survey that was created by the Urban Institute's Prison Research and Innovation Initiative, which was successfully used and distributed in facilities throughout Vermont, Delaware, Iowa, Missouri, and Colorado. We then met with both the unions and also DCR leadership to go through the survey, make sure that there weren't any concerns, make sure everybody was on the same page. So then we went facility to facility, literally post to post, to distribute and collect those surveys. And that was a huge effort that I do want to acknowledge Director Tommy Johnson for supporting us in that. If he didn't allow people to take this on their posts, I don't think that we would have gotten much of a response. So I really appreciate the department's support. And the survey was also available online. We then conducted talk stories in every correctional facility. These were very long days as we made sure to hit all 3 shifts. And then lastly, we finished with a report, which is in front of you today, that encompasses the survey findings, the talk story findings, and then applicable recommendations. And the primary objective for this report was to, 1, gain a deeper understanding of the corrections environment and the complexity the staff are facing, 2, enhance data collection to support transparency and accountability, and 3, offer recommendations directly from corrections staff on how to best improve and support working conditions in Hawaii's jails and prisons. So in the background there, you can actually see a small part of the survey. This survey was a behemoth. It was 106 questions, and it was divided into 8 sections. So we looked at job satisfaction, downtown, which is really referring to the department's leadership suite, so anyone above the wardens, really. Workplace culture, which is really focusing more inside of the jails and prisons. Staff health, purpose of incarceration, facility conditions, staff incarcerated people interactions, and then correctional practices and sanctions. That's really looking at whether or not people feel that our current system is more rehabilitative or more punitive. So we found that our distribution methods were extremely effective. 771 staff members took the survey, the highest being 73% of staff at Kulani, and the lowest being 42% at Halava, which is still really good. We're very proud of those numbers. After all the surveys were collected, the Criminal Justice Research Institute helped us in the data collection to analyze and gain insights from the survey responses. And on the side there, that's a breakdown of our key findings. What we found was that staff are feeling a total disconnect between themselves and the leadership of the department. We found that there was a lack of engagement and transparency and not being included on decision-making or operational decisions. And we found that staff were citing unsustainable working conditions, including mandatory overtime, having insufficient staff, and not having enough wellness resources. We found that collectively, all of those findings were impacting staff's health and well-being. 60% of staff developed a serious health condition due to job stress. Over 60% noted a lack of wellness support, and over 75% felt emotionally drained. However, despite all of this, staff did express having a commitment to respectful and supportive interactions with people in custody, though they also mentioned limited resources have hindered efforts towards true rehabilitative efforts. And lastly, we saw some notable differences between the jail and prison staff, which we'll actually cover on the next slide. So looking at the distinction between jails and prisons, the overall takeaway is that jails have more hazardous and critical conditions, staffing shortages, higher turnover rates, mandatory overtime, and work schedules that create significant conflicts at home in comparison to prisons. Prisons do have safety concerns as well, and prevalent turnover, but it's less severe. Jails also have alarmingly higher rates of depression, insomnia, PTSD, diabetes, and heart disease in comparison to the prisons. Jail staff also reported having serious thoughts of suicide twice as often as the prison staff. Jails reported having poorer food quality, lack of natural light, inadequate cleanliness, subpar living conditions for incarcerated individuals, and less alternatives to segregation in comparison to the prisons. Jail staff often describe their work as doing time as well. And prison conditions were also problematic, but again, just not as severe as the jails. This shows an urgent need to address staffing, safety, and health crises in the jails, where conditions are remarkably worse. And both systems require leadership engagement and systemic improvements to ensure sustainability and well-being for staff and individuals in custody. So then we looked at the distinctions between uniformed staff and civilian staff. And the big takeaways here is that uniformed staff have less enthusiasm for work, felt less appreciated by leadership, and felt less support in their career goals as compared to civilian staff. Uniformed staff were also more likely to change jobs if given the chance. And both groups expressed concern regarding communication and inclusiveness from downtown leadership. Uniformed staff were less satisfied with downtown's communication of a clear vision for the department and respect for input in comparison to civilian staff. Although uniformed staff reported more professional growth opportunities, they reported less leadership support, facility safety, and employee wellness in comparison to civilian staff. Civilian staff were more optimistic about rehabilitation and helping people make positive changes, and they were less likely to describe their job as doing time as well in comparison to uniformed staff. And although the health conditions in most areas were worse in uniformed staff in comparison to civilian staff, which is what we anticipated, I did want to highlight the civilians had developed more anxiety and depression than uniformed staff, and diabetes was about the same for the two groups. I thought that was really interesting. And I also want to note that those questions say specifically, since I started working in corrections, I have developed ACTs, so it wasn't before. So now we can shift into the talk stories. So we took all of the survey responses, divvied them up facility by facility, and then took those facility-specific responses into each jail or prison. We asked staff if their responses felt right, and if they agreed on them, and then we went section by section and asked for more insights and also recommendations. So what you see on these slides are the themes from each facility. Every facility is different and had their own priorities. HCCC was extremely concerned about the conditions of the facility, and they had the most empathy for people in custody.
When you go over the acronyms, I know most of us are familiar with it, but can you describe what the acronyms mean?
Yes. So HCCC is the Hawaii Community Correctional Center. KCCC is Kauai, so the Kauai jail. They were most concerned, they had the worst morale in the state, bar none. Staff really didn't even want to talk to us. They were so burned out. They talked about mandatory overtime the most and also working multiple posts, so one individual working 2 or 3 posts. The Maui Community Correctional Center was most concerned about training and also supportive communication from top down. The Oahu Community Correctional Center was mostly concerned about staff not coming to work, and they also talked a lot about not being heard or feeling valued, and they talked a lot about burnout. Halava, which is HCF, talked about staff not coming to work, and they wanted the most accountability for this by far. They were pretty upset about that. KCF is the Kulani Correctional Facility on the Big Island. They were mostly concerned about their facility leadership, who has since retired. They're also concerned about Kulani being a really restrictive facility. That's a minimum level facility, and they talked about a lack of programs, a lack of volunteers being allowed to come into the facility to help people in custody, a lack of movement, and things of that nature. WCCC, which is our Women's Community Correctional Center, was mostly concerned about their facility leadership, and also they felt a real lack of preparation for the incoming jail population. And then WCCC, which is Waiava, our minimum facility on Oahu, they had no concerns at all. They just wanted to offer recommendations to help out other facilities, which was really nice. So with that, we jump into recommendations, and I just again want to emphasize that every one of these recommendations came from the staff. I did not write any of these. We pulled all of these from the talk stories. We had many, many pages of notes from those talk stories, and these are the consistent trends that we were seeing across the board. So we split these up into 8 different sections. In training, we recommended comprehensive and consistent training for all staff, so again, top down. And that should include leadership, communication, and empathy training, and also mental health and crisis intervention training. For communication, staff really want to be included in the decision-making process, especially for issues that impact them directly. We also recommended regular and transparent communication and to improve internal communication within the facilities themselves. For trust, we recommended consistent and fair policies across the board and that those policies be followed. We also recommended regular leadership engagement, and so this is not just from downtown, but also within the facility. And also recommended more involvement, again, staff involvement in decision-making. For compensation and benefits, we recommended to increase base pay and also bonuses, and improve and expand uniform allowance to support professionalism. I know that one seems really small, but every facility had brought up the uniform allowances and how their uniforms rip and they're very expensive to replace. That was not one that I anticipated coming up, but that was a big issue for staff. And then also ensure accurate and timely payment. Staff talked about how sometimes payments can be really delayed, and when they go to fix it, it can take months to fix. Under recruitment and retention, we recommend to shorten the hiring process. We also recommended to revise the psychological evaluation. At least at the time of these talk stories, there was one individual doing all evaluations for every incoming staff member. And staff talked about how a lot of 90-day hires were denied, even though they were really good workers inside the facilities. We also recommended to enhance training and support. Under overtime, which is clearly our biggest section, we recommended to limit burnout, to create fair overtime distribution, to create incentives for attendance, to implement 12-hour shifts, to reevaluate the staffing plans and posts, to enhance policies for time off and overtime distribution, to hire more staff and streamline the hiring process, to improve scheduling flexibility, and to implement voluntary overtime program. Under staff and health wellness, we recommended mental health support, implementing physical wellness resources, and also creating a work-life balance. And then under concerns regarding incarceration, we recommended to ensure consistent transfers and access to programs for people in custody. We recommended to enhance mental health and rehabilitative services, and with that, to also expand rehabilitative and therapeutic programming. So, in conclusion, if we wanted to take 4 large takeaways from this report, I think that when you look at enhanced training and support, it's important to provide standardize consistent training, especially in crisis intervention and mental health care for both new hires and leadership. Under improved communication and inclusion, it's important to establish regular briefings and direct engagement from central leadership to build trust and transparency. Under increased compensation and benefits, it's important to adjust pay scales, add bonuses, and increase uniform allowances to reflect job demands and encourage retention. Under focused staff wellness initiatives, it's important to expand mental health resources, reduce mandatory overtime, and promote work-life balance to support long-term staff health and staff morale. With that said, I just wanted to thank all of the corrections staff who participated in this. It really meant a lot to us to hear from so many staff and hear their personal stories and for them to open up to us in such a way. We're really excited about this report and we hope that it makes some changes. So thank you all so much for allowing us to present to you today.
Thank you, Coordinator Johnson and Chair Patterson, and to you and your team for your hard work and coming up with these survey results and the annual report. Before I begin and open up to questions, I'd like to recognize Senator Carol Fukunaga, who's with us here today. And in the audience, we have Representative Kim Koko Iwamoto. Welcome. With that, I did before you came. Yeah. Members, questions? Annual report and staffing report to Commission on Oversight. Yes, Senator Fukunaga.
This is such a comprehensive overview and very helpful in terms of identifying many of the areas of concern. In your follow-up, have you had opportunities to discuss the report and its recommendations with the department leadership as well as some of the advocates? Because this seems to be really a good opportunity to kind of create collaborative solutions in a way that potentially would benefit not only the department leadership, but many of the stakeholders who have been advocating for improvements for a long time.
Yeah, I so appreciate you bringing up that question. So I'll start with the department level before shifting into community. So we have really tried to keep the department involved in this process without overbearing them since day one. And so we made sure to meet with department leadership. And again, thank you all for meeting with us and working collaboratively. We made sure to meet with them about the survey within itself. Then once we got all of the responses, we met with them as to what we were seeing throughout the trends. We met with them after the talk stories and also shared all of our talk story notes. It was a lot. It was a lot to go through, but we wanted to be as transparent as possible so that also give the department a chance that if they wanted to start taking action, or if they could start taking action on any of this, that they had the opportunity to do that. For the recommendations, we really wanted to stand true to having those recommendations come directly from the staff who are doing the job. And so although we've heard different recommendations from different entities, for this report at least, we really wanted it to be specific, coming from the corrections staff in the jails and prisons. And then on the community side, transparently, not yet. We just posted it on our website today. I'm sorry, I should have added, in the same way that we met with the department with those different pieces, we also met with the unions. And so HGEA and UPW, thank you. But we're always open to feedback in any work that we do.
Okay, it's not entirely clear to what extent your discussions with the department have also opened the door to their inclusion and participation with the unions and other advocacy stakeholders that have pretty much talked very specifically about many of the findings that you have outlined in the report. So perhaps it's too early. The report just came out, but I would hope that it kind of provides a neutral starting point for everyone to engage and move forward in a way that actually helps build that communication, trust, and working together towards solutions.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's our goal too. We have made ourselves available to UPW specifically, and also the department if they wanted to meet collectively to talk about this or any of the recommendations in there. I'll also note that any of the recommendations that we put out, we always follow up to see if the department plans to take them on, or if they'd rather not. Wherever they are in that process, we always follow up just to check in. So we'll be doing that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Vice Chair Wilczek.
Thank you for your comprehensive report. I know we've been talking about this survey for a little over a year, and I'm glad that the results finally came out. It's not all positive, obviously, but I want to focus on something good that's in this report, and that is at WC, the Women's Correctional Facility, right? Since that's the only one apparently that people seem to be happy to go to work.
Waialva. WCF is Waialva.
Waialva, okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. Waialva Correctional Facility. What is it that's going on there that is so uniquely different than other locations? What is it that's feeding the good staff morale at that location?
Warden Ornelas is the warden at the Waialva Correctional Facility 1. He was born and raised in Waialva. He's a correctional officer that eventually became the captain, chief of security, and he eventually became the warden. He's very engaging. He's the officer's leader, so he can speak to all levels of these correctional officers. They can speak to him, so he has open communications with them, and they have bought into his vision and his mission, right? Which is key to have the correctional force on your side. It's also a minimum security facility, so he's dealing with reentry, and all the individuals that are coming to him know that they're about to go out. So they're very willing to participate in all the programs that he has to offer in the vocational training. It's also a substance abuse program. And so I think there is a lot of support for the warden and his vision by his entire staff, that he has had less issues than the other facilities based on their mission.
So the warden is probably the key individual in all of these locations as to how
Yes.
the communication and all the trouble spots can be resolved.
Yes.
So we improve the training and empathy of the wardens, and that's a good opportunity for us to kind of trickle down to the rank and file ACO.
Yeah, I think that leadership throughout the correctional facilities make a massive impact. And so not just the warden, but also the chief of security. You know, if you have somebody who's continuously talking down to you or belittling you or, berating you, that doesn't make you want to come to work. It doesn't make you want to be engaged. And so what we were seeing is that, at the Maui Community Correctional Center, they love their warden. We got some of the highest regards about the warden there, so that's amazing. But it was actually that middle management that was causing so much tension that people just were desperate for communication training specifically. They were like, I just want to be spoken to like I'm a human being, And so it was really interesting, but Mark's right, at Waialva, they really, really created an environment there where there's so much communication, so much teamwork. Everybody knows what everybody else is doing. The warden walks the facility consistently. So yeah, we were really impressed.
I see that many of these problems are based on too few guards guarding too many inmates, right? And the stress that causes. But it's also well known that the overtime issues, a lot of it is due to the way that the ACOs game the system, right? They call in sick, they talk to their pal, can you cover me? Then you call in sick and I'm gonna cover for you. And then there's that federal leave thing that they take advantage of. So how much of some of the stress that is embodied in your report is due to a certain level of responsibility to the ACOs themselves, right? If they're over there working with their neighbor guard to like calling in sick so I can take advantage of overtime, then not all of it is Tommy Johnson and his crew. Some of it is just your rank and file guys who know how to game the system, and they should police their own. How much of that responsibility should be placed on the guards themselves for the stress that they see, because they're not gonna rat out their neighboring guard who they know is gaming the system?
If you notice the comments from Hawai'i, I forgot where it was, wanted the most accountability for this. So one of the officers said, I work 3 days a week, I call in sick on my Friday, I take my 2 days off, I call in sick on my Monday, and then I work 16, 16, 16, right? I do it because I can. He said straight up to us. I do it because I can, because I know nobody's gonna do anything. So that's why a lot of that conversation in Alava was, they were talking about, we just need more accountability. People need to be afraid to do that, or they're gonna lose their job or something. Because you're protecting the ones that are abusing, and the ones that are trying to do the best they can, they're just gonna fall in line because nothing's happening to the ones who are abusing the system. So how do we work together with the union and the department to figure out how do we have more accountability for the individuals that are playing the system? And you're right, but it did come up, very frankly.
Yeah.
I do it because I can. Yeah. And so where does that leave us in terms of labor issues? Yeah, and our discussions with union, and how do you help us solve the problem with your members? You're supposed to be providing the service for the state and helping to keep the public safe, but your staff are not coming, your members are not coming to work. Yeah, that's a higher level conversation.
Any questions? The chair has a few. In follow-up to Vice Chair Wakai's question on staffing and members showing up for work. In your survey results, I know Halava, wanted more accountability with their ACO and members. I know in the past there's been proposed bills on cash out program. There's been suggestions on a merit-based program. Do you feel that that's more sort of a department role, that DCR can already do that within their rules and procedures, or is that something that we as a legislature, something that we have to sort of create?
I think it's a legislative policy that needs to be created. How do you bring the union online? Yeah, that's really, to me, as long as I've been in corrections in Hawaii, it's really that constant battle of they're going to represent everybody, no matter what. Or you have other unions in the state, be it Teamsters or construction or whatever, if they don't abide by the union rules, they won't represent them. Yeah. So how do we find that thin line for our state correctional unions to say, hey, if they're not following the rules that you said you promised the state that you're providing the service, how do we hold them accountable for it? And how do we hold you accountable? You have to take accountability as well, right? Because we're the client. That's how I feel. We're the client, and you're supposed to be providing the service for us. So where is the middle point where you folks take ownership of your own membership, yeah, and give us the best that you have?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Some other questions I have is, I know on page 26 of your report talked about other states using similar surveys, for example, Vermont and Colorado. Was there something that you compared, to those states? I know they're a little different.
I know. So that was the intention of using a survey that other states have utilized. It really just came down to staff capacity.
I see.
When we looked at the priorities of what we could put in the report and what we could really focus on, we wanted to focus on the jail and prison distinctions, the civilian staff versus uniform staff. So that hasn't been something I've been able to really dig into, but I'd be more than happy to take a closer
And
look.
just to be clear, so the public and the committee does know, is that this survey was voluntary?
Oh, yeah,
Yes, it wasn't
absolutely.
mandatory.
Yeah, it was absolutely voluntary and it was completely confidential.
Got it. I know even in your report, do you also have, in your recommendations, do you have budgetary recommendations that also go with your recommended items? Or is that something you're still formulating?
Yeah, so we didn't, so some of the recommendations, for example, talk about staff pay, like the
Right.
base pay. So we didn't go into specific budgetary recommendations for the legislature because we kind of thought the department, if they wanted to take that on, that would be their role of figuring out what that looks like, where it would be, and then making that request.
And then the only other question I have is, I know we've done this and this was a success and it revealed a lot of things. Will the Commission on Oversight be looking to do future surveys? And if it's future surveys, will it be general or more targeted to different facilities?
Oh, you kill me. So we
I have to ask.
So it's funny. It's funny you say that. During the talk stories, I couldn't believe it, but people were asking if this could be an annual survey. And I was like, really? Like, you really want to do this again, you know? And we joked with them because it took a lot. I mean, it took so much work. And again, I want to acknowledge Dr. Aaron Harbinson in the back here with CJRI, who really helped us with the data collection. We are more than happy to look at doing this. Transparently, we will need more staff, but we're requesting more staff this year. And so hopefully that would be something the
It's gonna be
legislature,
about a year.
over a year, yeah.
And to Senator Fukunaga's point, you know, this provides us a baseline. And so I think if we were to sort of check in and do a progress, and if this were annual, this is something we could work towards to see if there are trends.
Yeah.
If they're going in different directions based on some themes and
Yeah.
suggestions that you do see.
Yeah, agreed.
Members, any other questions? Senator Fukunaga?
I think one point that, you know, kind of the interest in having this done annually becomes almost a way of enabling a lot of the staff to participate in identifying their top priorities, you know, for recommendations and actions. So say if we know that we have limited resources and, you know, they have staff pay, they have different areas of concern, you know, by doing an annual survey, I think one of the subsequent questions could be, what do you think is the most important thing that we should ask the legislature to help us take action on? Because I think, you know, the concerns about pay, about, you know, overtime, burnout conditions, mental health, and all of those cut across so many different categories of government service. I think if the employees are also involved in helping to tailor what the priorities might be, then I think it gives them a common goal, working together with leadership to be able to achieve, you know, whether it's the better pay, you know, step 1, step 2, step 3, then they feel like they are really participating in that, you know, collaborative trust building process. And so thank you. This survey has opened the door, I think, for many of the staff to feel like they can methodically begin to participate with their leadership in ways that will go far beyond what they may have initially thought. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Senator Rhodes, do you have any questions?
Sure.
While we have the commission on oversight here.
Okay.
You're good. Okay. If not, thank you so much. And we may
Thank
call
you.
you at the end if there are
Okay.
further follow-up questions.
Yeah, thank you so much.
The next department that we'll call up is the
Yes.
Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, DCR, Director Johnson. And Director, if you can identify yourself, and then if you want to, I know you have staff members here, if you want to introduce them as well.
Sure. Okay, good afternoon, Chair Elefante, Vice Chair Wakai, and members of the committee. I'm Tommy Johnson, the Director of Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I brought 2 of my staff members along with me. First is my Deputy Director for Rehabilitation Programs and Services, Sandra Munoz, and then I also brought our Deputy Director for Administration, Melanie Martin.
Thank you.
I just have some comments to read, and then I would like to provide some information as to the main 4 things that were left up on the conclusion, because we did do some things proactively, and I'd like to explain that to the committee. So first, the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation thanks the committee leadership for scheduling this informational briefing to discuss the Hawaii Correctional Systems Oversight Commission's reports on staffing and its annual report. The DCR appreciates the commission and its staff for their efforts in completing both reports. The commission reports highlight DCR's longstanding challenges in many areas, which we continue to be committed to systematically and methodically addressing. We are committed to improving operations, morale, and provide for a safer and more humane environment for those in our custody and care, and a better working environment for our dedicated staff that is more conducive to wanting them to come to work and to thrive in their employment with the department. The Commission's 272 annual report for 2024 is really 329 pages when you add all of the attachments. In part, provides information on the 8 correctional facilities, which includes recommendations for each facility. It should be noted that DCR is not surprised by most of the recommendations, as they are related to long-standing areas of concern where funding has been requested but not provided. There are other areas discussed that, although the DCR does not disagree, those recommendations fall outside of the DCR's purview, as the coordinator mentioned earlier. However, we remain committed to working with the Commission, the administration, the legislature, and the appropriate stakeholders to address these issues as well. In addition to the recommendations made by the Commission, the DCR is particularly interested in and requests additional information regarding the Commission's efforts to establish maximum inmate population limits for each correctional facility, including the Commission's efforts to formulate policies and procedures to prevent the inmate population from exceeding the capacity for each correctional facility. The DCR must take all persons ordered to our custody and care by the courts, including pretrial detainees, petty misdemeanors, sentenced felons, and probation violators. In addition, the DCR is also required to take all persons arrested on the strength of the warrant issued by the Hawaii Paroling Authority as it relates to alleged violations of the terms and conditions of parole. The DCR only has authority over approximately 5% of the current pretrial and inmate population of almost 3,800, which equates to about 190 individuals in our custody and care. Without the Commission establishing maximum inmate population limits agreed to by the courts and the prosecutors, there is very little the DCR can do to address severe chronic overcrowding that has plagued our jails for decades. With respect to the Commission's report on staffing, finding and recommendations, the DCR fully encouraged, as the coordinator mentioned, and supported the Commission's efforts and provided unfettered access to the 8 correctional facilities during their 3 8-hour shifts, including access to the inmates housed out of state at the Saguaro Correctional Facility in Eloy, Arizona. As you know, the Commission's report is thorough and addresses several areas, including but not limited to the leadership, communication, workplace conditions, health and wellness, interactions with the incarcerated individuals, differentiation between the jails and prison staff, etc. The department faces long-standing challenges in each area, and we are committed to improving from the top down and the bottom up. But to do so, we require sustained resources will be necessary, some of which are included in the governor's executive budget. Those not included in the budget will be requested next year and during the next biennium budget cycle. As the director of the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, I am very concerned with staffing shortages due in part to sick leave and family medical leave abuses by staff. I'm concerned about staff health concerns and both the living conditions of those in our custody and care and the working conditions of our uniformed and non-uniformed staff. The working conditions at our aging, outdated, and deteriorating facilities has been described by some as doing time, as the coordinator mentioned earlier. As a state, we must and can do better by ensuring our unified correctional system, which is one of 5 in the nation, is adequately funded. It is important to remember DCR correctional facilities operate 24/7, 365, and never close, and we never shut our doors, which places huge strains on our staff, facility infrastructure such as water, sewer, electrical, and the furnishings. For now, that is all I have, subject to the questions from the committee. I would like to say that we do work well with the Commission. We don't always agree, but I think we do agree that there are major issues we need to address, a lot of them longstanding, and some of them are outside of our authority, but we're willing to work with those entities. With your permission, as the Commission mentioned, they mentioned 4 in their conclusion, the last slide up. They mentioned 4 areas: enhanced training and support. So I'd like to go over those 4 real quickly. So what we did was we pulled all of the training sergeants out of the facilities and put them centrally with our training services division. What we found was that when the wardens were short-staffed, they were pulling the training sergeants off the line and putting them into ACO positions where they were manning a post. So we fell behind in training. By centralizing the ACOs to TSD, we then could put together a training strike package and send multiple training sergeants to a facility on every shift to provide the training that the ACOs need. There's a number of annual training requirements, such as use of force, bloodborne pathogens that our healthcare staff provide, OC spray, defensive tactics, first aid. So we believe by centralizing the training staff, we will have a better outcome with respect to the training, and then the wardens can't pull them off of their duties. Now, that's not a popular thing to do, but it's something we had to do to make sure we can catch up on our training. With respect to number 2, improved communication. So I previously ordered all the wardens, chiefs of security, deputy wardens for the 2 larger facilities, and the watch commanders to get off their butts, and every shift that they're on, walk the facility. The larger facilities like OCCC and Halava break it down to a grid square, whereas the 4 leadership folks that are there, the warden, deputy warden, chief of security, and the watch commander, each pick a grid square and they walk that in an 8-hour period, and then they switch it up the next day. So I think we have to do a better job, because I need to go back and check to make sure they're actually doing that, because I wanted to improve the communications. I wanted them to actually go in and don't just sign the book at the housing unit. They're going, talk to the staff, talk to the inmates, get the temperature of that particular housing unit to see if there are problems, and then find out from the staff. Now, I can tell you from going to the facility myself on the weekends and the evenings, I do get an earful, but that's what we're there for. We need to listen to the staff and take into consideration some of the things they're saying, because they're the folks on the ground who are doing the work, who are working with the inmates. I ordered my staff to set up quarterly talk story sessions with the inmate, with our staff. So how we plan to do that is I will record a talk story session, and we will hold it at a particular time. We'll take questions, we'll record it, but then we'll provide it available for the staff who aren't on shift, and they can email or provide input to that talk story session. Now, that'll be myself and the leadership team. We do regular facility visits, and with respect to the comments of OCCC and the Halava about wanting staff to come to work. So I want to make it clear that there is we have dedicated ACOs who come to work day in and day out, but we do have some hardcore folks who are abusing sick leave and who are abusing the Family Medical Leave Act. We have met with Kalani Warner, the head of UPW, twice last year, with he and his chief union stewards, and we asked him, I recently wrote to him and asked him, where can they provide us with what's called the new attendant program? We had an MOU in place with them that addressed the sick leave issue, that the punishment for ACOs not coming to work was that they had to build up time. And if they didn't build up the appropriate amount of time, then they were sanctioned. A vocal minority of ACOs didn't want that, so he didn't renew that last year. We met with him to ask him to reinstitute it. He said he wouldn't. So I wrote to him and asked him, now, okay, so where's the union's plan to deal with the new attendance we have? I have yet to hear from him, but to be honest with you, I just wrote that letter to him about a week and a half ago. So I'm going to give him 30 days and I'll follow up with him. Right now, the only thing we have is what's called 38A11 in the contract, which means if somebody doesn't come to work, it's strictly punitive. And the contract gives us no leeway. When they have a certain amount of absences and a certain amount of time and they're unexcused absences, then we have to terminate them. One of the issues we have is that even though we follow the contract to the letter, the UPW files a grievance for that particular person. That's affecting morale, because the members are saying, hey, why are you taking up for this guy? This guy's not coming to work. He's causing me to stay for overtime, but you're defending this person. So that's one of the issues one of the concerns we have. But we'll continue to try to work with Kalani Warner, and the staff are frustrated because they see that there are abuses in the system. And as the commission chairperson mentioned, ACOs will tell you, I can do it because I can. We got to close those loops in the contract, and we also have to reward those folks who come to work. One of the major concerns with the ACOs is the pay. So an ACO recruit makes about $5,355 per month. Once they finish their probationary period after 9 months, the salary goes to about $5,798 per month, which is $69,576. Well, with the cost of living here, you can't even buy an apartment. You can only rent for that. Even a sergeant, once a person makes sergeant, the salary goes from $69,576 to only $82,248. So one of the issues that happened in the 90s that affected the ACO pay, and I know at the time because I was a youth corrections officer, is that UPW voluntarily gave up the step movements for corrections officers for a one-time payment of about $5,600 to the ACOs. At that time, the older ACOs didn't want it, the younger ACOs did. So the older ACOs who had more time got voted down, but the older ACOs were thinking with the step movements, it affects their pay and it affects their retirement, where the younger folks didn't understand that, but they won out. So some of the things we did to recommend pay increases for the ACOs is that I sent proposals to DHERD to, one, return the step movements to the ACOs. It's not fair for someone who's just come out of the academy after 9 months and somebody who's been on the floor for 20 years to make the same amount of money, because this person has the experience and should make money, and the step movements would take care of that. I proposed hiring bonuses for ACOs where they would receive half of the bonus within 30 days of completing the training, and then they would receive the other half of the bonus within 30 days of completing their initial probationary period of 9 months. And if they failed to complete either of those, we would recoup the money back through a prorated method. I also provided a proposal where we offered a longevity pay raise, a longevity bonus to ACOs coming to work who had 10, 15, 20, 25 years of service, 30 years of service, but that is tied to them coming to work 80% of the time. So let me explain why I use 80% of the time. The state gets each civil service employee gets 168 days of vacation, 168 days of vacation, 168 hours of vacation a year, and 168 hours of sick leave a year, plus 9 paid holidays. That's almost 2.5 months off if they just earned and burned everything. If they came to work for at least 10 months a year, then they would get the lower end of the bonus, but it's tied to their regular shift, not the overtime shift, because that would address the abuse issue, right? And then if they came to work 90% of the time, then they would then receive a higher amount of the bonus. One of the proposals that is within my authority is if someone is coming to work 90% of the time, they build up their vacation leave, providing we have the resources on a first come, first served basis. Then my proposal would have been to allow them to cash in 2 weeks of vacation every year, beginning about the middle of October till about the beginning of December, so that they would get that check right before Christmas and can address things with their families. Another thing we did was we shortened the academy from 11 weeks to 8 weeks, because we found that folks on neighbor islands didn't want to leave their families, particularly younger ACO recruits, for 11 weeks. So we shortened the academy from 11 weeks to 8 weeks, and they would complete the 3 weeks during the initial probationary period at the facilities. Another thing we did is we did a cost-benefit analysis to look at how many ACO recruits would it take for us to balance out by taking the academy to the neighbor islands. We figured out that if we had at least 6 applicants from the neighbor islands, we would take the academy to them. And that would be cheaper than putting them in a pagoda hotel and paying per diem for 8 weeks. We would send 2 instructors there to provide classes to them and fly the instructors back home every weekend. So that covers number 3, what we did proactive for number 3. For number 4, staff wellness, we did ask for and received last year money to provide trauma-informed care to ACOs online with Windward Community College. This year in the budget, we asked for funding to do the same for non-uniform staff, and it is included in the governor's executive budget. Now, we've done a lot in a little bit of time, but there's still a lot more to be done, as you saw from the reports. And we're willing to work with the commission, the administration, and the legislature to address those issues and many, many other longstanding issues for the department.
Thank you, Director. Members, questions? Senator Rhodes?
Thanks for being here. With regard to the maximum number of inmates that you're supposed to have in the various facilities, you do have a number that is considered sort of what's supposed to be the maximum figure, correct?
Yeah, so we have a facility design capacity and operational capacity.
Okay, and those aren't the same. Those are
No. So the design capacity is ideal. The operational capacity means you can increase it by converting, either including 3 inmates to a cell or converting other space to some type of dormitory or some type of cell space.
So I'm assuming you're over operational capacity as well.
We are at some facilities, but not at our prisons. We are at our jails. So I'll give you an example. HCCC, which is a Hawai'i Community Correctional Center on the Big Island, is 134.1% of its capacity.
Of its operational capacity.
Operational capacity, right. Women's Community Correctional Center this shows 109, but we just opened up a 168 bed dormitory to move the females from OCCC to women. So to be clear, the comments made in the survey about, they wanted more information about the planning process. That was last year. The planning process is done. All the females have moved now to OCCC, have moved from OCCC to women's, and women's becomes a true hybrid prison jail. And we added a new 168-bed dormitory, a new administration building, a new visitation center, and a new intake center as well. Okay. And we also remodeled the whole KEPA for the work furlough program.
So you also indicate in your written testimony that you have control release control over only 5% of the population? Right. I guess I'm surprised it's that high. What authority do you have to release?
That is for the people that go through our work furlough programs.
Okay, so
those are convicted felons.
At some point, you can say, okay, you've done what you need to do, you can go now.
You can go now, but you can participate in first a work furlough program where you come back to the facility every day. And then if you do well in that, and ideally you want them to, and they obtain employment, become more self-sufficient, then you put them on extended furlough, where now they're living in the community, working in the community, and we're sending the case managers to see them, and they're reporting back to the facility every so often.
Okay, so even that's not, I mean, you can't just say, we're cutting all 5% of these people loose.
Yeah, no, I cannot discharge. I don't have the ability to cut someone's sentence short.
Yeah. Okay, but in terms of the furlough program, they have to go through steps before you can say, okay, you're done.
Yes, there's resocialization.
Okay, thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Could you provide those stats to the committee, if
Sure,
you don't mind?
sure. I'll give you we do a weekly population report that's posted on our website, but I'll make sure we send you a copy of the latest one that I discussed here.
Great, thank you. Members, other questions? Vice Chair Okai?
I appreciate the fact that you're telling your wardens to get out there and temperature check what's going on on the prison campuses. But if I'm reading this survey correctly, the communication problem isn't inmates and staff to the warden, it's from the warden to you. Mm-hmm. That's where there seems to be a lack of communication. So help us understand, once the warden gives you information about whatever good or bad is going on in their facility, does it get to you? And then what do you do in response to whatever the issue is?
Well, eventually some information will come to me, but the wardens report directly to the institution division administrator, Mr. Michael Hoffman, who in turn reports to the deputy director for correctional institutions, and then that person reports to me. But I want to make it clear, we have monthly meetings with the wardens. The deputy director for correctional institutions and IDA have monthly meetings with the wardens to discuss issues of concern, and all the wardens and the staff know that they can email me or the deputy director at any time with any issue, and we will then address it with the chain of command. And the deputies and I visit the facilities, with the exception of the deputy director of administration, the deputy director for rehabilitation program services and the correctional institution and myself, we visit the facilities all the time. We go on the weekends. Deputy Director Munoz even went by on, I think it was Christmas Day and on Thanksgiving Day as well.
Okay, well, I believe everything you said, but this survey tells us a completely different story, that there is not this clear communication up as well as down. So, I mean, I don't know how we're going to reconcile that, but obviously there has to be a different approach to your style of communication, which makes the ACOs feel like they're at least heard by you.
Well, I can tell you that. I mean, I'm willing to work with the commission to figure out exactly where that disconnect is. But I can tell you, Senator, when I go to the facilities, the ACOs are not shy about coming up and talking to me about issues. I mean, some people shy away from the director and the deputy, but the vast majority of them, I've been around long enough where they know they can come up and talk to me. I think what may be the disconnect is I can't get there on every shift, right? And I have 8 facilities. So I think the talk story sessions will help, and I'll work with the commission to figure out, okay, what is it the staff want from us to address this issue to make them feel comfortable that they do have access to the leadership besides just emailing us.
Mr. Patterson mentioned that, your glowing facility, the Waiawa Correctional Facility, key is having a spectacular warden over there, Mr. Arnellis. So how do we make more Arnellises in all of these other facilities? I mean, can you have him take his secret sauce and training and go to other do a warden training seminar?
I can have Sean talk to the warden, but to be honest with you, I think it's just because Sean came up through the ranks, because he grew up there, And because he's been there so long, I think there's a certain level of trust developed with him and that relationship's developed. And it may not be as far as well developed with the other staff. And then I think it also has to do with, it's a small minimum security facility. I think so what you'll find is the smaller the facility, I think the better communication they'll have. Larger facilities like the larger jail, I think it's somewhat disconnected because there's so much movement, so many things, but we can do better in those areas. So I have no problem asking Sean, what is the secret sauce? I can have him talk to the wardens at the monthly meetings that they have. And so what we do is at the monthly meetings, the wardens will host the other wardens at their facility. Yeah.
Is KCCC larger or smaller than Waiava?
It is, staffing-wise, is smaller. The numbers-wise, it has more inmates. It has more detainees, more pre-sentence.
Okay, because, I mean, if Kauai is smaller than Waiava, what you just said kind of doesn't jive, right? Smaller is better, and I can appreciate and understand that, but Kauai is small, and that's, according to the survey, your worst facility.
I think with Kauai, the issue is, and I'll be perfectly frank, we've had people there where a whole shift will call in sick. But a whole shift is maybe 5 people. And now the shift before that is stuck. And so that breeds morale issues. So we've spoken to Warden Jerry Jonah. We got a new chief of security there. And so we're hoping that things settle down some. And with respect to Kulani, even though you didn't mention it, once the warden did retire from there, we are seeing some improvements. It is a minimum security facility, and so therefore security should be a little bit more lax, but it's also our sex offender treatment facility as well.
Members, any other questions for Director Johnson? Director, I have a few questions.
Sure.
Following up on Vice Chair Wakai for the Kauai Correctional Facility, you mentioned about your recruiting class. So is the department actively recruiting folks on Kauai to fill positions that you need to for that facility?
We're actually recruiting statewide. So some of the things we've done is we've held a number of job fairs. We've gone to universities. We've started working with the military transition centers to get their folks. And providing we have 6, Kauai is small. I don't think we've ever had 6 candidates from Kauai go to our recruit class at any one time. I think Maui, we've had 6. The Big Island, we've probably had the most. And of course, Oahu, we clearly have the most candidates come from Oahu. So there, I think they have 5 or 6 vacancies. I may be wrong. I may have a little more, but in a small facility, that still hurts.
Yeah.
So we are doing a lot of stuff with respect to recruiting. We've done, I don't know if you went to the movies this summer, but we were in the movies in every theater. We are going to do another ad campaign. We have signs on the buses. We're trying to get signs on the with the Q code on the rail system. So we're doing a lot. I think the corrections is not sexy. It is not for everybody. And I'll give you an example. We have a lot of our psychologists leaving because they'd rather be in a clinical setting instead of a prison or jail setting. And so that's problematic for us. And so it's the same thing with ACOs. And let's face it, corrections is, it's a necessary evil, if you will. Corrections is not for everyone. And so we've tried to increase our emergency hires so that if they come in and they're working for us and they like it, they'll go to the academy instead of we put them in the academy and spend $100,000 on them to find out that a month later they resign because it's not for them. So
your academies now, they're 8-week programs. How many are you running per year?
We did in 2023, we held 3 classes. We put 56 ACOs on the floor. In 2024, we increased it to 6 classes. We put 156 officers on the floor. So moving forward, we're going to have 6 classes a year from 25, 26 and on. We had to get on top of our attrition rate. We weren't keeping up with the attrition rate. And so we hope by holding the 6 classes, we're able to, but to be perfectly frank, in speaking to Director Brenna Hashimoto of DHERD, she was saying that the workforce we have, the percentage-wise, may not go up too much because, one, people don't want to work in corrections. But, I mean, across the state, all the departments are short. were able to reduce our ACO vacancy rate from 30.4% to 24% over that year. That's including a lot of emergency hires, but we still have to do better because we have to bring the rate down to about 10% because of the sick leave abuse and the FMLA abuse by some ACOs.
Members, any other questions? If you don't mind, I have a few more.
Sure.
I want to talk about mental health and suicides at your prisons. I know that's been brought up in the annual report, it's been in the news. You talked about the partnership you have with Windward Community College and getting people even for your impacted correctional officers, right? In the event that they do witness episodes like that. What is the department doing to address these issues?
Well, we have two different things we're doing. One was the trauma-informed care we provide to them free of charge online. And two, we have what's called a priority reporting system. So for a priority one report, if an inmate is hurt or staff is hurt or an inmate is killed in a fight or suicide, then we refer those individuals to the REACH program for services that they want. One thing we're adding to the notification process is that the staff are spoken to then and there and provided with the REACH information on the spot. And we also ask our chaplains to come in and talk to the staff who witnessed someone get hurt or had to cut someone down from a suicide or witnessed a murder.
Okay. Shifting gears, I want to talk about your master plan for CIP or staffing. Does the department have a master plan for CIP projects for all your facilities and staffing?
Well, we don't. Our master plan, the last master plan was in 2003. We've asked for money over the years. We finally have money in the current executive budget. I think it's $10 million to update the master plan.
And that would be for what outlook? 25 years?
That would be
10 years?
for 10 to 15 years out, I think. I'll double check and I'll get back to you on it. And what it is, it's a complete comprehensive look at where we are now, where we want to be, and what do we need to get there. And part of the problem in corrections is, we compete with schools and roads and infrastructure. But I think what the policymakers have to understand is that the corrections facilities are open 24/7, even during the pandemic. And it's a lot of wear and tear and drain on the staff and the infrastructure for the facilities. And the fact that like parts of OCCC are 110 years old. If you've been in any of our facilities, and it'll shock you when you go to the mainland and you can go to a 25-year-old facility in the mainland and it'll look almost brand new compared to our facilities here. The OCCC is old, antiquated, and it wasn't built with programs in mind. It wasn't built with program space. It wasn't built for rehabilitation. It was built for short-term, hold them and let them go.
Okay.
Right?
Last two questions I have is with your facility at Waialva and Kulani, which I've toured and visited. I know it's not at capacity,
Right.
but I know there's different classifications of inmates that are at these facilities. Does the department have the authority to mix different types of populations, even at underperforming, or I wouldn't say underperforming, but underutilized facilities?
We could.
Like Kulani and
We could, but we will not mix pretrial and sentenced felons.
Right.
Because of the felons will prey on the pretrial. So a couple of things we've done to address that issue. One is we've had Chaminade University come in and Professor Janet Davidson is finishing up her final report on our classification system. When I looked at our classification system, it was time-driven and it should be event-driven. So let me explain the two. If you get a misconduct and it's a serious misconduct, it means you go back to medium or high for 18 months. There was no review in there. So really you're sending somebody back to do dead time. So if you do a high misconduct, then we're going to be looking at the person every 6 months instead of 18 months. The other thing we did, so far in the preliminary report we got, we're doing fine with the ORAS, which is a jail, the Ohio Risk Assessment Instrument. We're doing fine with that. The application, the assessment is good. We may not be doing so well with the level of service inventory revised for the sentenced felon population, because at some point in the early 2000s, some of the questions were changed for some reason, so it may have affected the outcome. So when we get Dr. Davidson's report, we're going to redo our classification system because I believe we're holding people upstream too long. So when you have something that's time-driven, they just sit. But if it's event-driven based on their behavior, then you can look at that at certain intervals and you can move them downstream faster. So that's one thing we did, we're doing now. The second thing we did was we entered into a pilot project beginning 1 January of this year. If you look at 353, it says we are supposed to bring people back 48 months when they're within their tentative parole date. We're going to go out to 60 months because.
16 or 60?
60. We're going to go out to 60 months because we're going to automatically reclass them down, because the only reason some are at medium is because of the time from now and the 48 months to the tentative parole date. So we instituted the pilot program so that we have about 1,000 inmates on the mainland right now. About 240 of them are temporary because we're redoing 2 modules at Halava. So the numbers on the mainland really is around 700 and something. So we're looking at filling that bed space in Waiava and Kulani Correctional Facility by lowering that classification level down so we can move them downstream. And so we can fill those minimum security bed spaces because they're work camps. And from those 2 facilities, they go to work furlough at the jails.
And the last question I have is, you heard about some questions earlier, if this would be an annual survey. Is the department open to having this as an annual?
I don't have a problem with it. I commend the commission for taking that on because it took them a year to do it. So if they want to do it, as the commission, as the court indicated, we gave them full unfettered access. We don't mind doing it because that helps tell us where we need to go. Are we doing well here? Or we need more work? And in those areas we're doing well, how do we get there? How can we take that success and move it to another area?
Members, any follow-up? Yeah, Senator Rhodes.
Off on a different tangent entirely. With regard to the mental illness of the inmates, have you given any thought to, or do you ever do apply for assisted community treatment orders before the inmate is released? So if they're in there for any length of time, you have an opportunity to observe what their mental health is, and if there's reason to suspect that they have a mental illness that may impede their functioning normally in society when they get back out. Have you ever, do you have the capacity and the interest in having people leave with an order on them so that we don't have to go back through all, we don't have to do the revolving door for 6 months before they end up back in your facility for some new crime?
I don't have a problem with it. We don't have the capacity right now to do that.
Which part of the capacity don't you have?
We don't have the mental health staffing to do the evaluations on everybody going out the door.
Okay.
I can tell you about 60%, my understanding, I could be a little bit off, my understanding is 60% of the folks in our custody and care have some degree of mental health issues. Of that, I'm not sure the percentage, some of them are seriously and persistently mentally ill. That would be the group I think you're talking about, because those are the ones who would benefit from treatment.
Danger to life, danger to self or others is the standard. But so the Department of Health, it's not something you cooperate with the Department of Health on. You can't say to them, hey, we've got this guy who we think is schizophrenic or having psychotic episodes. Can you come and look at him?
Right now, we just started an initiative with the 704 cases for the evaluations, right? So that's in its infancy, but we just worked out details with DOH. I have no problem discussing that issue with DOH, and I will contact Marian Suji, the Deputy Director for Behavioral Health, and I'll mention your comments to her and see if there's some way we can work together, because it is a good idea.
That would be great. Thank you very much. Thanks for your consideration.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. Other questions, members? Okay. If not, thank you, Director.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions for Commission on Oversight or DCR? Okay. If not, I want to thank DCR and the Commission on Oversight and members here and members of the public. I also want to acknowledge my staff, Taylor, Faith, and Jan, as well as Jasmine, and our Sergeant at Arms and our IT folks, Robbie and Natasha. Thank you so much for coordinating today's informational briefing. There being no further business, we adjourn.